Hello and welcome back to coverage of the third Louisville Cube League Cubevitational. This is the third video out of 5 total, with each covering one draft of the event, so please keep that in mind if you are trying to watch in order. If you haven't checked out the other video in the series, or you just need a refresher, the full summary of the Cubevitational is available in the first video in the series linked below. Today we'll be covering the third draft of the tournament, the Peasant Cube Draft. The Peasant Cube focuses on and exclusively contains cards that have appeared at uncommon or common rarity in any imprint or digital set. Due to the lower overall power level, we also exclude a lot of more powerful cards in these rarities. All basic lands are considered snow covered, and as you can see on the screen, there are a number of sub-themes that are supported throughout the cube. You can see the full list at the link on the screen as well as in the description below. There may have been updates since these matches were played, so you may see cards in the video that are no longer in the cube, or see cards in the cube that weren't available in this draft. Just for a quick recap of our standings after the first 2 drafts of the event, we have 4 players currently with a 5-3 record. Matt, Scott, Jacob, and Joey. You can see their game win percentage over there on the right, which was used as the tiebreaker. We have Bats in 5th with a 4-4 record, Dittert and Bryan with 3-5 records, and Prose with a 2-6 record. Now that we're all caught up on that, let's hop right into some matches.
Hello and welcome back for the third draft of our Cubevitational event. This time we're looking at a Peasant Cube. We have Dittert versus Bats as the first matchup. Commentating today, it's again me, Joey.
Scott.
And Prose.
And Dittert and Bats, I know we're both on somewhat slower decks, I believe. Dittert was on blue-black control, I know. Scott, what do we have on Bats' side?
Yeah, he's just playing black and green sort of mid-range cards. Pauper Cube, Peasant Cube. It's all about just grinding out value with 2-for-1s as much as you can. So he's looking to ramp out into some mid-range threats and some slightly larger creatures as well.
We see quite a bit of ramp here, but always possible that Dittert's got a counterspell up for this first big offering. So yep, Remand, buying a turn.
Remand getting the Spirit Monger from Bats there.
And that would have been quite the monster there that he ramped into.
Indeed. I know that in this cube, the threats out of this color combination can be fairly resilient to removal, so it looks like Spirit Monger sticks on its second cast and might be difficult for Dittert to deal with. Until
not too difficult.
Magic. Oh my goodness. So that is true. I'm pretty sure this is Bat's Peasant Cube list, but I'm pretty sure it has the full suite of different control magic options available to it. So Dittert probably has some number of those.
That's a Putrefy coming in to take care of the Spirit Monger, and then Diabolic Servitude to bring it right back.
Quite the swing.
We saw Bats, I believe, piloting a similar strategy in the pre-modern cube, so we'll recognize some of the cards and strategies. And it looks like Dittert's back on the back foot, just that Spirit Monger continuously changing sides.
Liliana's Spectre here. Although I believe Bats is empty-handed, so...
Yeah, a card that you want maybe on the play before Bats has been able to ramp out. It definitely can be good in the matchup, where if Bats was still in his early development turns, if you can snipe some of the important cards out of his hand. But here, just trading with a mana dork, still in a lot of danger from the Spirit Monger.
Yeah, and Bats' ramp has been such that it's likely that any card he draws off the top of his library, he's going to be able to cast too. So Dittert's really up against it here. Although if he can answer the Spirit Monger, then really not a lot more pressure coming from Bats at the moment. So
exactly, we mentioned that he's empty-handed. So if this one threat gets dealt with, which
so this is Halo Forager, which is, I believe, going to flashback to Putrefy from Bats' graveyard. which conveniently does have the cannot be regenerated text, despite Bats having mana open to regenerate the Spirit Monger.
Halo Forger also starting the slow buildup of maybe pressure coming back the other way, being a 3/1 flyer itself. If Bats isn't able to redevelop this turn and we get to have some kind of interaction up on Dittert's side, gotta feel like he's taking the advantage here.
Yeah, Dittert thought about that block for a minute. There are a fair number of ninjutsu creatures in this cube, so definitely a worthy thought, but
fair point, especially Dittert having flyers, being black-blue himself. Maybe was keenly aware during the draft of any ninjas that were going around in the draft that he didn't pick up.
Diabolic Servitude on the Paradise Druid, not the most exciting play, but Tolarian Horror, a pretty exciting play on the other side.
Yes, paying almost full retail for it. Got to be pretty unlikely in Dittert's deck, but managing to chip away, choosing to keep the horror back.
Thought Erasure, just going to see a land.
Now it feels like Dittert is firmly in command of this game here.
Right, paying full price for a Muldrifter means that didn't have anything else to do on that exact turn.
Booster Tutor.
Oh.
Yeah, so I believe he's just pulling from the undrafted cards in the cube here.
Right, this cube is not an exact 360, so there are extra cards to pull from to get this Booster Tutor going. And we're seeing him flip over the cards, so won't be able to maybe see every one clearly, but should be able to pick up whichever one he ends up going with.
Yeah, I believe the first one he flipped over was a counter spell, so that one's got to be tempting.
Well spotted.
Hard to say no to that on this board, I think.
Now with his flying forces backed up by that counterspell, looks like we have a pretty easy 3-turn clock in the air. Just got to avoid 2 impactful draws from Bats over the next 2 draw steps.
That's also assuming that Dittert, like the rest of his hand, is also blank.
True.
Well, there's Godzilla, but we do know about the counterspell in Dittert's hand. So does Bats, so...
Yeah, and it's got to feel bad in Bat's spot here, though, that even though he did get the counterspell, it seemed like there was a consideration to not doing so. So Bat's going down to... Oh, okay. Tolarian Terror entering Abyss mode, just eating one of Bats' creatures. Don't assume that'll matter, since the Flying Force is still lethal next turn.
Opportunity to just refill again. Force not going to do it, so...
On to game 2.
I was going to say that game was sort of emblematic of Bats, ramping out into 1, maybe 2 sizable threats, but then Dittert answering them, and Bats just wasted too many turns top decking land and ramp creatures.
Indeed. Though it's important to remember his way around the threat that Bats had last game was Bats' own can't be regenerated removal spell. It's possible that in a similar situation, Spiritmonger could be a big threat if it did come up this game, or some of the reanimation spells to help restock definitely can help after Dittert answers some threats. So it's not like Bats has no way to battle back, just that game got too out of hand in the other direction too quickly.
Yeah, and here Bats has a hugely impactful Sylvan Library on turn 2. It's going to make holding up counterspells a lot more punishing for Dittert if Bats' hand continues to grow and grow.
Immediately taking 4 from it as well to keep an extra card.
You know, we did see some flying creatures from Dittert, but I do think Bats can be pretty aggressive here, just Sylvan a lot in this game.
Looks like he's not being that aggressive with it, though. Only took 1 card on this second turn, it seems. So definitely not going as all in on it. Maybe thinks he does have some inevitability if he can keep his life total high to not get games stolen away by the Flyers.
Here's a Blastoderm as the first test spell.
Definitely a strong one if it manages to stick. Probably not a lot. It's going to get excluded, but probably not a lot that Dittert can do to interact with that once it's in play.
He can take 15. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
You too can remove a Blastoderm from your opponent's board for the small price of 15 life.
Here we have a Booster Tutor on a much different board than in the last game.
I'm not seeing anything too exciting yet.
Is that Soul Manipulation? Soul Manipulation would
Soul
have to be
Manipulation
pretty
there,
appealing here.
Yeah.
Especially if he has a Swamp to play this turn.
Yeah, a lot of cards like this make your mana a little bit flexible casting the spells you get, but Booster Tutor does no such thing, so you do have to be able to cast the spells that you're picking.
We do take that Soul Manipulation.
And of note, the counterspell we saw last game again came off of Booster Tutor, so we know that that isn't an option for something that Bats has here. We saw, or Dittert rather, we know that Remand was their last game, and a third land increases the options, presumably.
So no Swamp for the Soul Manipulation, but... That's with just a ton of mana here again.
Here's that Spiritmonger. If we're able to sneak it in under any counter magic before that Soul Manipulation can be up, it seems like the ideal threat.
Dissipate.
Just dissipated. Great answer, given that we know that there's at least one reanimate effect as well.
And you have to wonder here if Bat's not digging deeper with this library is starting to bite him, because he looks like he's letting 3 mana go unspent this turn cycle. Giving away that tempo seems like a big cost in this kind of matchup.
Is this the color shifted Sarah Angel?
Yeah, Sarah Sphinx. So
Sarah
4/4
Sphinx,
flying
okay.
vigilance. Not the scariest thing on the planet, but at the same time, well, if you're going to be taking 4 from Sylvan Library, a reasonably fast clock.
True, and now that it's presented, though, is when we see Bats go for taking extra cards. Looks like he's also paying 4 life for that Dismember.
Yep.
Interesting. And then just playing Servitude. Is he short on black mana?
Can't quite tell, but that is what is implied to be the case. Looks like
It looks like forest plains and some kind of dual land. I'm not sure what that.
I believe that's a green-white land.
Okay. Okay, so just only one black mana, making that dismember pretty costly, especially with the Sylvan Library in play.
Mm-hmm.
Dittert's still just stuck on the one black as well. But continuing to tap out aggressively.
Ribbons of Night.
Okay.
Gain a little life back. That'll certainly help buffer through these Blastoderm turns.
Almost missed our Sylvan trigger.
We know Dittert has Soul Manipulation in hand, so this has got to be a good turn for Bats to try to sneak a creature in under it. It's surprising how much we're seeing Dittert tap out. We saw it a lot game 1 as well. It implies that even though we know we have at least one counter right now, maybe not as much instant speed interaction as we would normally expect out of a blue-black deck.
Beetle coming in here, making Dittert discard a... Looks like the Halo Forager. No targets for it this game.
If Dittert is sitting on a double black spell and just felt the need to dig for a second black mana.
Possibly. Of note, that Ribbons also makes this Tolarian Terror cheaper if that had been a thing in his hand. And it gaining 4 life means that the 15 damage we were talking about off of this fading creature isn't as big of a deal.
True, yeah. And now we found our second black, so we were able to commit that Tolarian Terror to the board and still have Soul Manipulation up and ready to go.
There's that Putrefy again. We'll have to pay Ward. Oh, that's what the Dynamo was tapped for. Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna draw a card in response, making our hand Soul Manipulation and 2 Mysteries, and the Putrefy works. Attack for 6, sizable, but Dittert is not currently facing down lethal, and the Blastoderm is about to go away as well, so... Oh, just going for the Race Dead mode here.
Interesting. He is up, it looks like, a card in hand already on Bats, and with Bats at 8 life, the Sylvan Library is running a little bit low on its usefulness, still giving some selection, but maybe just thinks the tempo of getting a creature in play is worth it at this point.
Yeah, a fairly interesting choice as well, because there's the Terror, there's the Sarah Sphinx, and then there's the Halo Forager.
Yeah, for now with a fresh removal spell in Bats' graveyard to utilize as well.
Just goes with the Terror, though.
Yeah, with Blastoderm in play, it feels like the most obvious option.
Sure, Lotleth Troll and Eternal Witness is the hand for Bats.
Lotleth Troll, another regenerating threat, so worth the moment of consideration, but Ewit definitely seems like the correct pick there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to take the not Eternal Witness card if you're literally leaving an Eternal Witness.
Lotleth Troll and versus 2 unknowns. Board looking pretty stable for Dittert at the moment.
And I didn't catch what Dittert did with his Surveil, so even has some extra card selection off of that. Thought Erasure is, I believe, the name of the card.
Yeah, it looks like there's a land in his graveyard right under it, so I'm...
Yeah, I believe that
eyes are right.
That land gets surveilled away, I believe.
Yeah.
Good spot.
Which, that's basically like drawing a card, you know? It's great.
Yeah.
Interesting decision here, because you don't really want to trade your creature away for a Blastoderm that's about to die, but I don't know that you want to go to 5 life either.
I'm going to 5 every time. I'm not scared.
Right. It's hard to imagine what would be in my hand that would make me want to make that trade. We saw last game that once Dittert did get control, it took quite a fair bit of shenanigans. I guess with Servitude already set up, it is maybe more of a discussion.
Control magic, yeah. Remove a blocker, force a block. I don't think we have any interesting targets for the Servitude. I think there's Eternal Witness and the Beetle, and that's it.
Yeah, although Eternal Witness is not the worst thing to get back.
Right, and just being able to block the Tolarian Terror matters a lot.
Right. Get Eternal Witness, regrow the Beetle. Or the Putrefy,
well, you
honestly.
Yeah, you could get the Putrefy and kill the Horror Terror. But we are thinking about it a little bit here.
Right, because there is still a black source, right? We ended up finding that duel, but there is a basic swamp in there at some point, I believe.
Yep.
I don't think so. I think he's looking at 2 forests and a plains. I think we just have the...
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, I was talking about Dittert's side. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so don't have the black for the Putrefy then.
Yeah, wow, this whole game he just found... I mean, I guess he found... no, just the one.
Just the one, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm forced to consider if maybe this would have been different if we were more aggressively using the library just to get a few cards deeper earlier on.
Something we like here.
Well, we know Putrefy is there. Which we're not unhappy to cast, I think.
Was that a Plains? That doesn't catch that, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No, they might not end up catching this, but it doesn't matter too
terribly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is not Zahid. That's the other one. Thrix, the Sudden Storm. 4/5 flash flying. So.
Whoa, that's huge.
It does make his spells that cost 5 or more cost 1 less, and they can't be countered. But I imagine that that's not the relevant text on this card here.
Yeah, I mean it's an end step 2-turn clock.
So we've seen plenty of expensive spells from Dittert's deck in terms of Tolarian Terror, Ribbons of Night, Muldrifter. Muldrifter now only costing 2 mana to evoke, I believe, is how those spells interact, though I'm not entirely certain.
This creature didn't find us anything off of its activated ability, but it did reset the Sylvan Library a bit, so hopefully Bats' draw step is a little more fruitful this turn because he's going to need something here.
I think he's thinking about whether or not he wants to... Oh, he actually can't because... Oh, I guess he could before...
Well, yeah, he has to do it before he draws a card, before he activates his Sylvan Library, so... And I would imagine there's not a ton of creatures that help much against Dittert's threat, so opts just to let it transform and then take the library trigger, which, as we saw there, not yielding.
Fruitful, yeah.
Yeah.
Gonna slay himself with his library here, and then yeah, that'll do it.
Unfortunate that we couldn't see Bats string together much there, but Dittert's deck seems in top form, though definitely more tap out than we usually see out of Control. Dittert continued to do well for the rest of this draft, actually managing to pick up a 4-0 finish. How did Bats end up through the rest?
Yeah, he continued to struggle a bit, only picking up 1 match win, ending this draft at 1-3.
Unfortunate, but we will see how things shake out for everyone else. Back here for the second match, it's me versus Jacob. I was on a blue-white flash style, or flash and blink style deck. Scott, can you speak to what Jacob was on?
Yeah, Jacob's bringing a very similar deck to what we just saw from Bats, sort of black and green, mid-rangey threats, some mana ramp to accelerate into them, some removal, some reanimate effects. Very, very similar to what we just watched.
Yes, and happy to hear that two players were splitting that pool of cards. Maybe a reason why Bat's deck didn't end up with quite everything it wanted, because I felt in this draft like everything I wanted was available. There were a lot of very powerful cards wheeling for me, particularly in the third pack, I remember. Here, I'm having to read a card that I'm even now not remembering exactly what it does.
Boreal Outrider. It lets him pay a extra snow mana when you cast a creature, or if snow mana was used to catch a creature spell at interest with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And all of our lands are considered snow in this cube, so. But no follow-up creature, just an attack.
Some mana set up here. And a Chupacabra.
Of course, I had forgotten that while I said pack 3, everything I wanted I got, there was some early on back and forth. Chupacabra, obviously a great creature to blink, but does mean I'm playing black cards. And from my memory, it's not very many black cards, just ones that are very powerful and worth the splash, like Chupacabra.
Yeah, and Jacob, despite starting out strong with a 1-drop elf into a 3-drop, has not really made a play since then. But here we have a Shriekmaw, since Joey so kindly gave him a target.
Yes. Shriekmaw normally feeling great to hard cast, getting a 2-for-1, but killing, I believe that's Cloudblazer?
Yep.
Which had already been a 2-for-1 for me, so still ahead in the value on that race.
Yeah, and this is exactly where the blink deck wants to be. You know, your opponent is not making very threatening plays, giving you a lot of time to set up, and it is hard to combat a late game of a blink deck that gets a couple things going here. It's just the value parries you so fast.
And while Shriekmaw can't take out the Chupacabra can take out the Shriekmaw.
Yes, though Shriekmaw would have been a card I would have loved in my deck, obviously. Evoke great with blink and return to hand type effects.
Jacob tapping out here for a Palaka Worm.
The worm is very scary. Does a lot. If I have another way to blink the Chupacabra, at least that's an answer. But you mentioned how similar to Bat's deck, we saw Bats had several reanimation effects. I believe Jacob might have had the same.
Well, there's Stonecloaker, so.
Yep, so we are. This Chupacabra is feasting.
It's not going to be hungry very much longer.
Gets in for 2 with White Mane Lion, but still, Jacob has gained some life this game, and where you have a very slow road to try to get all that damage. Just need a turn of him not landing these haymakers.
Yeah, Scion of Darkness, pretty big threat here. Cloudblazer the only thing for it to bring back, but
Joey definitely not wanting to see that happen.
Yeah.
Right, I do have enough toughness, power and toughness to get in the way of it, but doesn't feel like what I want to do with what I've developed so far.
Nati with 4 mana still untapped here. Looking at Jacob's deck list, there are quite a few juicy hits here, so I wonder if we're going to see something nice.
Joey clearly unhappy with the cards he drafted, so he wants to play with the cards other people drafted.
Oh, and a Fierce Empath. Interesting.
Joke's on you. It just lets me get a card that I drafted.
True. That was Phyrexian and Jester.
Okay.
Which will be an answer for the Scion of Darkness, but not this turn.
Right. Gaunty also a slightly awkward answer because Death Touch is nice, but it would still give the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, still, Scion of Darkness does trample, and it just needs to do 1 single damage to get its effect, so...
Good.
Yeah, this is... Yeah.
Maybe didn't need to make this play, but...
I was going to suggest just those, White Main Lion, Gaunty, and Fierce Empath is like Death Touch and a couple things you don't care very much about to take out the Scion, but shoving all of them in the way definitely gets the job done as well.
Having Phyrexian and Gesture for any follow-up play, I think just not letting this get Cloud Blazer was the play. Oh, this is so brutal.
The Tyvar stand here, kind of a blowout. Not only is it going to give his creature +5/+5, but it's also going to make it indestructible.
Wow.
Which means he's gonna clear, he's gonna get a Cloud Blazer, and keep his Scion of Dark. Or he now has the option for any of these. Actually, I guess he doesn't have to take the Cloud Blazer, but
let's be real.
I think Gaunty is tempting, right? Like,
yeah, I suppose
it's a question of what is left in your deck versus what could be in Joey's deck.
I feel like when I have Ingester in hand, though, I feel like Cloud Blazer is the more appealing, should be the more appealing pick, but opts for the Gaunty.
A Canker Bloom coming in.
Gets mana tithed. It feels good to mana tithe something this late in the game.
Absolutely. It's a shame you couldn't mana tithe that Tyvar stand.
Yep. He played around. I forgot that had occurred, but now that you mention it, I do remember being quite upset at the time.
Anyway, we devour this Scion of Darkness here. Hope to undo some of the damage that has been wrought here.
Let's see what the Gaunty card is.
Reflector Mage.
Not really sure that's the card you want to Reflector Mage here.
Yeah,
right.
that.
If I was at a lower life total, yeah.
Although, we still have threats here.
Yeah, with the Goreclaw follow-up, a bit of a clock, and obviously can't Ingester this turn. So he's actually presenting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's actually presenting lethal currently. Which, obviously, a handful of cards over here is unlikely to stick, but...
It is a line, though. I mean, he saw a route to victory, however unlikely, and he's going for it. Cloud Goat Ranger, however, immediately puts 4 bodies in the way.
It's not as much of a detriment, though, because Goreclaw gives everybody trample as well when he attacks, so not the best.
Each creature with power 4 or greater.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Not everything, yeah.
Right.
So it would just be himself in this case, yeah.
Yeah, so we've clogged the board back up, and the Ingester is still in hand, ready to go next turn.
Reflector Mage is one of those creatures I was talking about that I remember getting late in the draft and feeling like I had to be very alone in my lane. Feeling good about the draft, but it's also a card that, as we're talking about, is not very good against me. I wonder what the other Gaunty cards were. I don't remember asking Jacob after the game, but...
Yeah, so this Goreclaw should not have died here.
Yes, I think after the game we realized this, or at some point...
I think it might have been in the next game, but...
Yeah, at some point, not now, I read Goreclaw and inform Jacob of what an idiot he is.
Yeah.
Jacob and I are brothers. We've been playing card games together since we were very young. When we switched to Magic from other games, Jacob actually got good at games, but still sometimes just doesn't read the card.
Eagles of the North here.
Eagles of the North. The rarely hard cast.
Eagles was one I took fairly early in this draft, hoping it would help to fix my mana.
I want to pause you here because you did just make fun of Jacob for not reading his cards, and then you followed up by doing the exact same thing. Kitchen Finks had first strike there; should not have died. But
you
power
also see
and
me
first strike
trying to reclaim my cards.
Yeah,
trying to reclaim my cards as Reflector Mage and Gaunty, both Jacob trying to claim them in his graveyard.
Yeah, so kind of a comedy of errors over the last couple turns here.
Yeah, Eagles of the North rarely cast. I've played with that card some amount outside of Cube, but so rarely get the trigger. Did not know that it gave first strike.
Yeah, so just a Nature's Lore. We have something. Snuff Out.
Snuff Out and a trade. But with that Ingester known about still in my hand, gotta feel really good here.
Yeah, what can Jacob even draw here to get back into this game?
Maybe letting the Goreclaw die was actually tactical, so you couldn't make a gigantic Ingester. Maybe that was the move. But yeah, with the Circuit Mender.
Circuit Mender is what that is. Okay.
Cutting the clock a bit. This, I believe, is Confounding Riddle. I'm just going to let Joey look at the top 4 cards of his library, put one in his hand and the rest in his graveyard with that Kitkin Soldier token.
And it looks like one of those might have been Flicker Wisp, which would have been pretty nice on this board to flicker the Circuit Mender, so it means whatever I found was better than that. If I saw it correctly, that was Flicker Wisp.
Miss Meadow Witch, not a bad one.
All that untapped mana, my goodness. Rich Kerr on an empty board, not what you want.
Oh, and boy. He plays Rancor on it. Do I blink it in response to the Rancor? Yeah,
he's just and that's enough. That. Yeah.
Right. Maybe not even correct to do that cute play to kill Rancor. Maybe better to just blink Circuit Mender an extra time. Because it triggers on Leaves play and Initiator's play, but
it's all gravy at that point.
Yeah. Here we're seeing a very quick start to game 2 as both of us just playing lands, getting established. Here we have the
Filigree
Familiar,
the less good version of Circuit Mender for me because it only triggers on dies for drawing the card, whereas Circuit Mender would trigger on blink. Still good enough to be in my deck here, though, as gaining the life is nice if it gets blinked, and Eagles fixing my mana a little bit to lead to some kind of removal spell. Oh, yes. This is the one that gives him a human, Stroke of Midnight.
Stroke of Midnight, yeah. So I feel like you're much happier to be in this type of game than Jacob's deck probably is.
Right. Any game where we're even, my value creatures threaten to do a lot more. To the point where, like, I'm fine trading off here just to eat up some of his mana for the Rancor, draw a card. Perfectly happy with that exchange.
Cloud Blazer.
And the incidental life gain off of Cloud Blazer, Filigree Familiar, Circuit Mender means that I get to this mid-game versus him, I think, pretty easily. Kitchen Finks as well, we saw last game. Lots of ways to gain little bits of life that just help me survive long enough to be able to cast a bunch of big spells together and leave up mana to possibly blink them as well.
And here we are doing our Shriek Maw Chupacabra dance again.
I have to assume Jacob was reading it to see if it had to kill a creature, similar to like a Flame Tongue Kavu, to see if maybe he could put me in a position where I needed to blink it, but then it would end up killing itself.
Okay, a little bit of action. Wall of Roots and Fierce Empath to get that Scion of Darkness. Just the Rancor we knew about, just to make that Fierce Empath a little more capable blocker, I guess.
White Mane Lion, as Scott said, truly starting the Chupacabra dance. Don't have the Signet this game to help with mana fixing, but looks like I've just drawn enough natural black sources that still get to leave one of each of my colors up after casting this Chupacabra. Being 3 colors in this cube, fairly dangerous. We saw it from our last match how even being 2 colors, sometimes you're coming up short. Or I guess Bat's deck was splashing a 3rd color, but not finding enough of his black mana early definitely cost him. But at least in these games, looks like I'm getting away with it.
So just cycling the Scion. Oh, I think we, on the nose, may have been short a black source there to cast it, actually. So
We have Animate Dead here, so
Animate Dead getting countered by that Confounding Riddle.
Well, that's rude.
Yeah.
Yes, Confounding Riddle, a new card, obviously one I hadn't played with a lot, but was very impressed with over the course of this draft. You saw in both these games me cast it, one for each of its modes, the Impulse mode and the big Mana Leak mode, and just very powerful effect.
Gonti here, gonna steal a card of some variety.
Pausing to think a lot about this other play. Playing a land before playing Circuit Mender implies possibly Ephemerate still in hand.
Finding the old gods, yeah.
So if I do have Ephemerate here, dang. Feels like that would have put this game pretty quickly out of reach for Jacob if I had gotten that extra value, but didn't have it. Still feeling pretty ahead.
Yeah.
A lot of mana here. Oh.
My Palooka Worm.
Yeah, going up to 32 life here, even ignoring the state that the board is in, down the worm, down the Scion of Darkness, it's starting to feel a little bit insurmountable. Just getting a land with the Saga there.
Yeah. 3rd chapter next turn, giving his wall Death Touch, not going to be that relevant. So, Snuff out. Palooka Worm, just essentially a big Filigree Familiar for me.
Well, there is that Ephemerate. Gonna take down the wall. Tyvar Stand will let it stick around a little bit longer. Until the upkeep, I guess.
Yes, doing it again.
Yeah. And that's enough
And
for
Jacob
Jacob.
just packing it up. Even though his life total is still high, just I have a full grip of cards and no real way for him to battle back through all the value I'm generating there. So I was very happy with my deck, as you could probably hear me talk about it. I ended up going 4-0 in that draft, being on Dittert's team, I guess, so we didn't have to play each other. How did Jacob end up?
They're parallel to our last match. He also ended up 1-3 with his black-green mid-range pile, so...
Yeah, we two players splitting those cards. You can see the essence of a really good deck in there. The Servitude and Animate Dead being split between both players. Sign of Darkness and Palooka Worm being in this deck, whereas Spirit Monger's in the other deck with Lotleth Troll to discard them. All the pieces are there, but split between these two players, just not quite enough for both of them. But we'll see what kind of decks we see in the other matches going forward. Back for the third match of this cube, we have Bryan versus Prose. Bryan is playing a red-black sacrifice deck, kind of aggro to mid-range. Prose, what did you have on the other side of the table?
Kind of the same thing. We saw two halves of the black-green deck in the first two matches, and in this game we're seeing two halves of the red-black deck in the same match, so...
Yes. Your deck, I believe, had been slightly more mid-range, though here we're seeing one of the cards I'm sure Bryan would have wanted. And of note, even though we haven't seen a sacrifice deck or even a red deck in the other matches, we did see a lot of the value black creatures you would want in a sacrifice theme out of my deck. Cards like Shriek Maw from Jacob's deck or the Chupacabra from my deck that get value and then are okay to sacrifice. So definitely some pieces possibly missing, not just that you've cannibalized from one another.
Right. And yeah, this game isn't necessarily showing it, but I do think, like you said, Bryan's deck is a little bit more skewed towards an aggro build. He's got a bit of an artifact sub-theme.
Yes, Patchwork Automaton, very curious to see in a sacrifice deck. Not sure if there's some modular creatures that possibly pair with it. But
Arc Trail
Arc
here.
Trail, brutal. Brutal to feel.
Board.
It's very rare to cast a removal spell on Patchwork and feel good about it, but that was very good.
Yeah, the extra token for Mere Sire is going to get to block a goblin, but not unexpected. Bastion of Remembrance from Bryan, one of the cards I would have loved to have.
Looks like we're grabbing a human token here, I believe.
Skenrender going to take care of that.
Bastion, definitely an odd one in a sacrifice deck.
But it does the drain life when a creature dies. But it's only when your creatures die. So it definitely makes the decision making for me a little bit awkward moving forward.
Oh, true. I think I actually had Bastion confused with a different card.
So it's a Scytheclaw Raptor. Not really going to matter much in this match, I think, but whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, that dinosaur will deal 4 damage to them.
All right. We're seeing a lot of good pieces here from Bryan. If we can just get some value creature like Reassembling Skeletons or something worth sacrificing, we're in good shape.
There's the Akiba Gang Shinobi. Bryan did block with his Raptor that turn, so we didn't get to sneak it in there, but...
Not worth possibly attacking with the Goblin. Doubt we would see a Viscera Seer block.
Yeah, looking back, not sure why we didn't do that. I guess maybe it's just because if he doesn't block, I have a blocker for the Raptor coming back, but no real good reason. It's a Bronze Plate Boar, the follow-up there from Bryan. So playing Yeheni. Not a bad card to have here, as it gives me a sacrifice outlet and makes it a little less painful when Bryan's creatures are dying.
Right. I think with a lot of these cards, though, we're seeing how off-theme some of these decks got as different cards were taken, because the artifact aggro theme, it looks like Bryan's got a lot of the cards from it. Here we're seeing cranial plating as well, but the boar, the automaton, not things we would normally expect to see.
Yeah. Not really sure why Yahenni didn't get involved last turn, too. Wasn't a great block for it there with the ability to make him indestructible, but
Oh, is it not cast last turn?
it has haste.
Oh, okay.
Which entirely possible that I just missed or forgot about that. But here's another dinosaur. This one's a bit bigger. Charging Monster Soar.
Normally when you're drafting Yahenni, it is not for its haste ability, so...
Yeah. Pretty big attack there. Bryan choosing not to block. I guess you want to keep the Viscerus here for any shenanigans you can put together here. The Triarch Praetorian here, just a 2/1 flyer until he gets to unearth it.
Right. It feels like one of the cards that bridges the gap to the artifact theme, though, for Bryan's deck. So
Definitely.
Starting to make more and more sense. This card and the Mirror Sire. So the logic starting to become clear.
Super duper death ray. Yeah, that's just gonna.
Super duper death ray is brutal here. Yeah.
Not only does it spell trample, but unlocks the full trample from the Monster Soar, and
right, means the Monster Soar wouldn't die in that combat. So
incredibly well named card for that situation.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like Bryan was in a bad position, but he certainly was super duper dead.
That's true, yeah.
By the end of that.
Flayed Husk start here.
Yeah, Flare Husk, an odd one. Not sure exactly what it's aiming to do in a lot of the decks. It seems like a weaker card, but Mortar Pod, so just a couple of germs, one on each side.
I don't have a germ token because I'm a heathen, so.
Shame.
Yeah.
Could have just said Bryan stole yours since he was the first one to the germ.
True. Bryan is notably only on red mana, although I'm also only on black mana. So
I was about to point that out, yes. So it looks like that was an equip of cranial plating, but the germs traded very quickly. And with the one Mortar Pod creature just getting thrown at the Flare Husk germ.
Land here.
Oh, and Bryan not only finding a land, but finding the black land, possibly unlocking some of his hand, even though it's very quickly the one he uses. No, okay, we're rewinding, using a red mana. Attacking for 4?
4. Yeah, cranial plating definitely a bit more on display here this game, and yeah, with no
here
land,
we see the dinosaur again.
Done. Yeah. No land. Mulligan on the play for game 3.
Flare Husk again, even though I made fun of it in our last game, definitely just contributing towards the artifact count.
Automaton follow-up. A bit of thinking here on the Goblin. Looks like I've opted to pay the Echo. There's Armix, which is an artifact, so it does pump the automaton, but still just stays home.
Armit's a pretty good threat as it can kill any good strength follow-up you have here. Though Arc Trail, again, brutal here. Arc Trail, very powerful removal spell.
Yeah, Armix was very scary there, especially with 3 artifacts in play already, but...
Right, any follow-up you had, you could always double block it with your goblins, assuming you had a powerful follow-up that he had needed to kill and left both goblins in play, but here, Patchwork's starting to get pretty big. Luckily, you're not experiencing the mana issues you were the game before, but maybe the existence of Armits just means that Patchwork got to live, and that's going to be the big change over game 1.
Definitely, yeah.
Do you remember if you had much removal in this draft?
Not a ton, I don't think. Taking a quick glance, there was the Super Duper Death Ray. I see a Bone Shards and a Rift Bolt, but...
So, Bone Shards could kill the Patchwork no matter how big it gets. If we have any artifact, we can put it out of range of Super Duper Death Ray this turn, which with you on 4 mana would be pretty appealing for us to be able to do now. But here we just see Incinerate first.
Yeah, just gonna sacrifice the Sling Gang Lieutenant to itself. Get that drain rather than just let it die.
Interesting. So offering the potential quad block maybe would have had a trick. Especially since he didn't equip Flare Husk to it ahead of time. It makes that seem more likely.
Just some goblins coming to play.
Interesting.
So
because we have a ninja.
This was probably the reason for the not quad block last turn then.
I was going to say, this attack seems dubious overall, but getting the ninja in definitely now makes it make sense.
I'm going to get clocked by this automaton for at least a turn here.
Yes, really would love to see an equip of Flare Husk over to it if we don't have anything better to do, though I honestly got to question if this is even better than equipping Flare Husk over, because from Bryan's perspective, all he's seen that could kill the Patchwork would be Super Duper Death Ray, and you have 5 mana, so you could pay the ward cost.
Well, Flare Husk does cost 2 to move, so with the Bastion.
Right. I feel like I would have rather seen that than casting the Bastion.
Sure,
the Bastion isn't adding that much to this current board state. But
all right, well, here's Kazul, who, whenever a creature attacks me, its controller has to pay 3, or I get a 3/3 red ogre. Which, against this kind of wide board, was a good find. Bryan gonna unearth the Praetorian, which will net him a couple of cards.
True. It means he has to take a turn off of his aggro. I guess even though he's been pretty aggro, your life total is still high, so maybe it's worth that. But he doesn't get to attack with it. It ends up in exile. I don't know. I feel like in that spot, I would have spent some amount of time considering equipping Flare Husk over and attacking as a 5/5, paying the 3, offering to trade for both your creatures. That seems pretty appealing to me, and saving the Unearth for later.
Kazul has 5 power, yeah. So it could have been a single block, but I'm not sure how incentivized I would have been.
My mistake. I misremembered Kazul's stats. In that case, definitely agree with Bryan's play.
Blood Artist. So with Blood Artist and the Bastion here, he's got a bit of power, but again, still not really good blocks just due to that, or good attacks due to that Kazul.
Yeah, I don't love this attack. Really would have preferred him being more patient. Oh, remembering the patchwork off of the cranial plating.
So this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 power. Makeshift mannequin on the
Ooh.
Sling Gang. Without trample, gives an opportunity for a okay block, although I guess maybe we're just content to let them trade. Get some life drained.
Yeah, if that was the plan, I'm curious if maybe it would have been better to attack with the mirror, equip and attack with the mirror instead, though I guess keeping the mirror in play for the artifact count is worthwhile.
I have my own Triarch Praetorian here, although mine gets to stick around.
Right, and being a 4/4, your board is now starting to get quite large, though still nothing able to really attack past this patchwork freely.
Yeah, and even without the patchwork, it's pretty hard to attack into the Blood Artist Bastion at 10 life. Bryan's gonna kill his own mirror here, which does 4 damage to me between its ability and the 2 on Die's effects.
Interesting.
Yeah, not sure where he stood on just straight up sacrifice outlets, but definitely that specific play made me feel like I was in a lot of danger here.
True, but he could have just equipped it with cranial plating and attacked with it, and you would have had to block it.
Similar outcome, yeah.
Because Flare Husk is on it, he wouldn't. You could have blocked with a goblin, and it would have lived through the attack, and also he would have had to pay the 3 mana.
Riftbolt for the Blood Artist here is nice because it means that my creatures dying no longer threaten to just kill me.
Right, but it does put you at 4. He has 3 creatures in play that when they die will each deal you 1, so... Or no, 2 creatures in play?
2 creatures in play, yeah.
Okay.
The Flare Husk and the Cranial Plating don't have anybody holding them currently. Okay, so there's Judith. Got to imagine the Sling Gang's getting activated. Yeah, so it's going to be a net no life lost or gained by anybody here, but it does take out the 1/1 because of Judith's ability. Gargantua here does have 5 power, again thanks to Judith, so it makes this attack not as silly as it looks.
Looks like life total is just getting updated, but if Bryan can string together some creatures, maybe the Bastion will allow him to finish off the game, though seems like Sling Gang being able to gain at least 1 more life could be a key relevant piece.
So paying for the Kazul trigger here. I'm blocking with the Ogre, it looks like, although maybe having second thoughts. I don't really feel like I should be incentivized to try to kill this thing. So yeah, just the Ogre blocking. Which 4, 5, 8, 13. Oh, Bryan showing he had Lightning Bolt, which meant that if I had blocked the Automaton, I would have just died. Okay. That attack makes a little bit more sense there.
So, Lightning Bolt coming up. Did you have lethal on board?
I did have lethal on board, yeah.
Okay, I was still doing the counting when
with the Judith buff on.
Oh, okay, that's what I was missing.
Lethal, yeah.
Judith made it over lethal, plus I guess the post combat sack of Sling Gang.
Yeah, so it looks like it would have been 5, 6, 7, 8, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 damage, yeah. So
if he bolts Judith though, then he lives but has like no outs, presumably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. That all makes sense.
Still taking 1, 6, 7, 8, 12 damage here, yeah, so
all the pieces came together for Bryan, but unfortunately that was as close as Bryan managed to get, as he ended up going 0-4 in this draft. We talked about how many pieces were missing, and it definitely showed in his matches. Prose, did you manage to finish much better?
A bit. I managed to go 2-2 in this draft. There were definitely a few pieces that I wanted, stuff like the Blood Artist and the Bastion that ended up in Bryan's deck, which made my deck a little bit off course, but overall there was enough power there to eke out another win on top of this one.
Right. Some good aggro elements with the top end Montresor, the Death Ray, Arc Bolt, Rift Bolt removal suite, so definitely some good stuff going on there. But well, we still have one more match to finish out this draft. Let's get on. Back for the final match, we have Matt versus Scott. Matt is playing a blue-red spells deck, and Scott, what do you have going on the other side?
Yeah, I'm a red-white aggressive. I got a bit of a token spent with plenty of anthems to pump all those little idiots up, and some burn to round it out here.
So, as someone who, in this cube and others, enjoys playing blue-red spell archetype, I can say that usually this feels like a pretty good matchup if we have the right burn suite. We saw in the last match Arc Trail, Lightning Bolt, a couple other very good burn spells being taken by other players. So 4 red drafters overall, including the 2 last round, the 2 this round. So possible that we didn't get quite the burn suite we want, but we will see.
Yeah, and oddly, I'm essentially the only white drafter at the table, but could not find enough white cards to just be mono white somehow. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but
interesting.
It was my intent to be one color, and I ended up pretty solidly in 2 here. This isn't just like, 20 white spells and a small splash. Like, I am white and red through and through here.
Right. I know I picked up a fair number of them because until Pack 3 it wasn't clear that I was going to be able to get all the blink cards I wanted, so I had some of the aggro cards in my sideboard, but definitely surprising to hear that you felt like there wasn't enough, as it doesn't seem like there'd be anyone else biting in on that.
Yeah, and we did mention earlier that this cube is not exactly 360. In fact, it's quite a bit bigger if memory serves. So it's possible that just a lot of the cards I was looking for simply weren't in the draft also. So
indeed. Don't remember if we saw any of the key white aggro cards during Dittert's booster tutor flips, but here we just got a bunch of goblins on both sides and a channeler, which looks like it's pretty close already to Delirium. We have sorcery instant and oh no, my mistake. I thought I saw a creature in there, but guess
now
not.
There's a creature.
That is fair. 4 damage from Kavu, 4 damage to the Kavu.
My draw of this game has been somewhat anemic here. Really slow start, much slower than I'm looking for anyway. But
and we see how quickly Matt is playing, so clear that he's feeling pretty in control.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say my draw, as slow as it's been, has been going like toe to toe. We're exactly even on the board, and just trading 2 damage back and forth. It's funny that we both think this is the correct line to do because we both have, burn spells. He's got counter magic too, so maybe I'm attacking an error here, but...
And the only spell that we've seen other people draft that Matt would maybe want besides the burn spells I mentioned is Tolarian Terror, usually very good top end for this deck, though there's several Tolarian Terror type cards in the cube. I'm not familiar with
Ransom here. Similar to the Super Duper Death Ray.
Oh, Gandalf's Sanction, you mean?
Gandalf's Sanction, sorry, not Sauron's Ransom. But yes, Gandalf's Sanction.
Right. So, like Tolarian Terror, cares about the number of instants and sorceries.
Yeah, swords for the Keldon there, but it doesn't matter.
So, Gandalf's Sanction dealt enough trample burn damage to allow Matt to win that race, it looks like. So, on to game 2, starting out with an Inspector. Getting one of our previous invitational winners, our Kobold token to represent a clue here, since it didn't have a clue token on this table, it looks like. And we see it cracked there at end of turn, it looks like. So going into Scott's third turn, hopefully able to develop some aggression. As looking over Matt's list, I can tell you Gandalf's Sanction is not the only top end that Scott will need to be worried about in the very late game. So hopefully able to get more of a board presence early.
Really, I have a bit of a decision to make here.
Oof. Immediately force spiking whatever that was.
That's an Inspiring Overseer.
Doesn't matter, it's force spiked.
True.
Twist Spear coming down, so again, Matt just opting in to let's trade damage. We see a mountain in his graveyard that got surveilled, so that's 2 types instant land.
You guys didn't want to repeat the Honorable Goblin duel from game 1?
Well, we'll see if both these creatures crack in again. I assume with this Whirler getting cast, we will see that.
Definitely a bit of a problem when he just added 3 creatures to the board here. We're trying to crash into the red zone, so see what I'm going to do about that.
Bit of a wall, but not a lot of great blocks with the tokens. Oh, and if the rogue
Clearing Spirit into a spell, a removal spell nonetheless, so trying to even up this board a little bit here. Now the question is, am I serving, and if so, with what?
Double block on the Crasher.
Right. It didn't seem like it made any sense to exert there, so allowing it to just go ahead and trade for those flyers. Lightning Strike answering the Clarion Spirit, which seemed like the way Scott could have maybe run away with the mid section of this game.
Attack for 2, but leaving the Chandler back.
Yeah, still not delirious, so...
Yeah, though we did see it put, I believe, that Psionic Blast into the graveyard, so...
Yeah, I believe we're on land creature instant right now.
Little Screech. One of the better white cards in Peasant Pauper Cubes here.
Just a whole army in a can.
And I get to come in with a flying token as well. So now I have a sizable Air Force here. There's not a lot in the way of Wrath effects.
Interesting. I wonder if that was main phase 2? No. Okay. The reason to possibly wait until main phase 2 to do that would be to be able to have that 3/3 Dragon Rage Channeler on defense against these spirits and birds, but doing it pre-combat to get Delirium, it then would have to attack. But looks like Matt was okay with that, as he was trying to keep up his own end of aggression, though against the value of Battle Screech backed up by a couple of removal spells, seems like that will be impossible. So very likely going to have to go to the next game unless Matt's able to put up a very quick defense against this plethora of flyers.
Yeah, there is the Gandalf sanction again for an amount, but I don't believe it's going to.
And we see him
here,
flashing Shower of Coals in hand, a card I was about to mention that could have cleaned up a fair amount of that defense if Matt had found his 5th land and it had been a red source. I believe he was short the 2nd red for that still at the end of that game. Mother of Runes to start, but dealt with just on time. Quarter Paladin following it up. Well, luckily, the Mother of Runes game happened on a game Matt was on the play, as he does not have 1 mana answers to it, so what needed to be on the play to have a chance to answer it at all.
Kenra Spell Spear just trading with the Paladin.
Jumped on white mana here.
A good chunk of damage, though, so this Factor Fiction needs to find some good action from Matt to not just let Scott's Force start to build faster than Matt's able to answer it.
And find action it did. That's a 5-spell Factor Fiction.
Yeah, one of them is Gandalf Sanction too, which again, just a brutal card to see in a Factor Fiction.
Right. And the cards are fairly expensive, though, so it's not guaranteed that they're going to allow Matt to double spell anytime soon, which is what he needs to do to get back ahead. So I think that Preordain may be a nice one for Matt to pick up, depending on how this is split, just so he can double spell with it on one turn and then hopefully allow it to set up a more impactful double spell the second turn.
Yeah, so Keldon Champion, Psionic Blast, Preordain is the pickup.
Swift Spear, Preordain, Psionic Blast to answer. Oh, but we have swords for the Mentor here, using Psionic Blast to get a prowess trigger before swords, so life total effectively stays the same because of the life gained off swords after a prowess trigger.
Really adds a small little edge that Matt rarely misses.
Oof, and Scott missing a turn cycle here, it looks like, so...
Yeah, I think I'm still on just a single planes, and there's quite a bit of double white cards in my deck, quite a few, rather.
Mentioning the downside of having to be that second color that you weren't planning to be.
Yeah, although Flametongue Kabu for the Oliphant is a pretty solid exchange for me, although him answering back with a Beetleback Chief is definitely putting a damper on my dreams of attacking here.
Fight with Fire.
If one of the cards in hand, though, is a Battle Screech or some kind of effect like that, even though at this point, actually, Matt's ahead on the race, so it needs to be something stronger.
Heroic Reinforcements.
Oh.
Just gonna make a few creatures here.
An insignificant chunk of damage, but still feeling pretty behind.
Yeah, I'm curious about the reasoning for that attack, because if Matt just pays Echo, he just has 10 damage.
No, there's 7, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The champion had already done its damage, yeah. But I guess Gandalf Sanctions here just
manages to
bringing
deal
that
enough
game
trample.
home.
Yeah. As we see the power of Gandalf Sanctions in that style of decks, we mentioned that he didn't pick up Tolarian Terror or any of the other creature versions of that effect, but Gandalf Sanction, perfectly fine way to finish the game. Don't need any big creatures. As Matt picked that one up and ended up stringing together overall just a 2-2 record. Not sure exactly where he stumbled in his other matches, but reasonable finish. Scott, how did things finish out for you?
Also finished with a very solid 2-2 with that pile of small idiots.
Mm-hmm. Unsurprising to hear that against some of the slower decks that we saw around the rest of the table, that you were able to get in under them. A lot of the green decks that looked like they needed a fair amount of time to set up, I imagine, were a bit easier to get under than Matt's removal heavy strategy. But that's the last of our matches here, so until next time, we will see you in the next draft.
So after that draft, we did see a bit of a shakeup in the standings, with Joey and Dittert both popping out a 4-0 to move into first and second with a 9-3 and 7-5 records overall. Scott and Matt round out the top 4 with 7-5 records each. Jacob at 6-6, Bats at 5-7, followed up by Prose at 4-8, and Bryan at 3-9. Next up in the Cubevitational will be the Artifact Cube Draft, which was new to us for this event, so please keep an eye out for that coming soon. If you are interested in any more info or information about this draft or the league in general, feel free to check out the description panel for all of our links and info. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you soon.